That was the year she had it all. And it was also the year my inheritance came through. Genevieve Reed. Back in college, she was our class president, the only daughter of Northwood City's wealthiest man. A certified genius with a perfect GPA and a full ride scholarship to Harvard already in her pocket. For some reason known only to her, she turned down the Ivy League to enroll at our decent but unremarkable state university. A legend like her shouldn't have ever crossed paths with a guy like me. But then just before graduation, disaster struck. A massive financial scandal. Her family's assets were seized, their bank accounts frozen. Overnight, the princess was out on the street. That's when a check from a long-lost grant estate landed in my bank account. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more money than I'd ever seen. I thought about my own family, a long line of blue-collar workers, good people who worked with their hands and never had the chances I did. The thought, crazy and audacious, flashed through my mind. This is my chance. So, I drove my beat-up Prius to where she was staying and made her an offer she couldn't refuse. I'd give her the seed money to rebuild her life. In return, I wanted her to have my child. I never expected her to actually do it. And I sure as hell never expected her to take that money and, against all odds, claw her way back to the top, rebuilding her family's empire from scratch. To avoid the inevitable reckoning, I did the only thing I could think of. I took our daughter, only a few months old, and vanished. That was 2 years ago now. My hand was cuffed to a bedpost and I was watching her walk toward me one slow, deliberate step at a time. A cold smile played on her lips. My eyes widened in terror. Don't do anything crazy. Killing me is still a felony. Her eyes, the color of warm whiskey, sparkled with something that was murder. Honey, she purred, her voice a low, dangerous caress. It's getting late. Time for bed. Pretty lady, want to buy some lemonade? It's super sweet. I promise. Oh, you're so cute. Can I just pinch your cheeks? Hey there, little one. How much for a cup? I was stretched out on a faded lawn chair, a cigarette dangling from my lips, watching my daughter Hope as she stood on a wobbly stool. She expertly charmed the college students milling around the campus quad, their wallets opening for her big brown eyes and even bigger smile. It was amazing how much cash you could rake in from a jug of powdered mix and a cute kid. We've been open for an hour and we're almost sold out. Daddy, was I a good helper? I must have drifted off. Hope had climbed down from her stool and was now nestled in my lap, poking my cheek. The best helper, I said, scooping her up and lifting her high. My little girl is the best in the world. Looking at her perfect face, I felt a surge of pride. Asking Genevieve to have my baby was the single best decision I'd ever made. Hope had her mother's face in miniature and a brain that was miles ahead of any other 2-year-old. She could already do basic addition and subtraction. It was terrifying. And I was damn glad I got my hands on those funds when I had the chance. When I was her age, I was still eating mud. Her chubby little finger pointed at my chest. Daddy hole. I looked down. A cherry from my cigarette had fallen and burned a small brown-rimmed hole in my t-shirt. I just laughed, pulling her into a tight hug and burying my face in her hair. As we were wrestling, a voice cut through the air, sharp and furious. Leo Vance. The sound was ice-cold and my blood ran colder. Even after all this time, I knew that voice instantly. I was too terrified to turn around, but Hope, fearless as ever, twisted in my arms to look. A moment later, she murmured, "Wow, a really pretty lady." I took a few deep breaths, telling myself to stay calm, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. Finally, I forced myself to turn. There she was, dressed in a simple white sundress, her face adorned with light makeup, a white ribbon tying back her dark hair. She looked exactly like she had the first day I saw her in freshman English. I was so stunned I couldn't speak. "Pretty lady, do you want lemonade?" Hope's tiny voice broke the spell. "We're all sold out today. You have to come back earlier tomorrow." I snapped my gaze back to Genevieve. Her eyes were fixed on me, glacial and unforgiving. It was only when she looked down at Hope that a flicker of warmth, something like love, entered them. I'd always known she would find me eventually. I just hadn't expected it to be so soon. As she got closer, my legs started to tremble. I could see the fury in her eyes, and my own hands began to shake uncontrollably. I hadn't actively followed her life, but you couldn't avoid the business news. The new CEO of Reed Industries was known for being ruthless. "Daddy, why are you shaking?" Hope asked, her face a picture of innocence. I forced a weak smile and wiped the sweat from my brow. "It's nothing, sweetie, just a little hot out here." Hope mimicked me, patting my forehead with her small hand. I just kept my eyes on the ice queen in front of me, my smile feeling more like a grimace. Genevieve Reed. I couldn't help but marvel at how fast her empire had grown. I've been hiding out in this forgotten corner of the state, and she'd still tracked me down in less than 2 years. We just stared at each other. After what felt like an eternity, I saw her eyes begin to well up with tears. I couldn't take the silence anymore. "Oh, how did you find me?" I stammered. "Daddy, who's this pretty lady?" Hope chirped. "I'm your mother," Genevieve said, her voice softening into a tone I'd never heard her use before as she looked at Hope. I didn't get it. When Hope was born, Genevieve hadn't given her a second glance, too consumed with her business plans. I was the one who'd handled the late-night feedings and diaper changes. Now, she was putting on this perfect maternal act. To my surprise, Hope turned to me, her big eyes wide with confusion. "Daddy, I have a mommy." I froze. I honestly hadn't expected her to ask that. She'd never brought it up before. Suddenly, the air grew chilly. I knew what that meant. Glancing at Genevieve, I saw the frost returning to her eyes. "Of course you have a mommy," I said quickly, trying to smooth things over. "How else do you think you got here?" Hope, scratch your head. "Didn't I come from a meteorite like Superman?" I felt my face flush. "Who told you that you came from a meteorite?" "You did. In the story you told me about the baby who flies to Earth in a rocket ship." Her eyes shone with undeniable logic. "Leo Vance." Genevieve's voice was dangerously low. "What exactly have you been teaching our daughter?" "Hey, I'm innocent here." I protested. How was I supposed to know a 2-year-old would get philosophical about it? "See, Jen, I told you he was no good. He's already filling her head with nonsense." A new voice joined the conversation. A woman stepped out from behind Genevieve. She was nearly as beautiful, but her eyes held a venomous glint. "Well, if it isn't Cassie," I sneered. I thought I smelled a snake in the grass. It was Genevieve's cousin, Cassandra Reed. The same Cassie who had vanished when the Reed family went bankrupt, only to reappear, all smiles and flattery once Genevieve was back on top. After Jen and I had gotten together, Cassie had made it her mission to undermine me, constantly belittling me, while Genevieve said nothing. It was one of the reasons I'd left. Cassie immediately clung to Genevieve's arm, putting on a wounded expression. "Jen, you see, we came all this way to bring him back. And this is how he treats us." Before Genevieve could respond, Hope, still perched on my shoulder, piped up, "Lady, even I don't whine at my daddy like that. And you're grown up. You should be ashamed. That's my girl." I roared with laughter. She knows a phony when she sees one. Cassie's face turned bright red. It was probably the first time a toddler had ever called her out. She dropped Genevieve's arm and shot me a look of pure hatred, but that's all she did. With Genevieve now the undisputed powerhouse of Northwood City, and with Cassie's own father's company dependent on lucrative contracts with Reed Industries, she wouldn't dare upset the golden goose. And she knew that little girl was the most precious thing in the world to Genevieve. "That's enough," Genevieve said, her voice cutting through the tension. I stopped laughing, my eyes turning cold as I waited for her to side with Cassie like she always did. But to my shock, she pointed at her cousin. "You go back to the office now." Cassie sputtered, but Genevieve didn't even look at her, just waved a dismissive hand. Then she reached out, her intention clear. She wanted to hold Hope. Cassie had bowed in defeat, trudged away. After a few steps, she glanced back over her shoulder at Genevieve's back, and for a split second, her expression was pure poison. She thought no one saw, but I caught the greed and malice in her eyes. Meanwhile, Hope was looking at me, her own eyes a swirl of emotions, fear, longing, hope, anxiety. As much as I didn't want to let Genevieve hold her, I saw the raw vulnerability on her face. I remembered how weak and alone she'd looked in that hospital bed after giving birth. I gave Hope a small, almost imperceptible nod. My daughter nervously extended her arms, her little face tense as she looked at Genevieve. It broke my heart to see her so anxious. Genevieve swept her up into her arms, holding her tight, and finally broke down, her voice choked with sobs. "Oh, my baby girl." It was the first time I had ever seen that woman cry. Not when her family lost everything. Not when she couldn't afford to eat, but now she was a wreck. And even though it was the first time she'd ever hold our daughter and her tears were messy, the image of them together was, I had to admit, beautiful. "You're my mommy," Hope whispered, clinging to Genevieve. Her own tears starting to fall. Sometimes the power of blood ties is just staggering. Hope had never met this woman, but on some primal level, she knew. Seeing them both about to dissolve into puddles, I decided to be the nice guy. All right. Don't hog her all day." "Shut up." They both snapped in unison, turning to glare at me. I threw my hands up in surrender. Okay, you two are the bosses. My mistake for even talking. The truth was I missed her. But the chasm between our lives wasn't just a valley. It was the Grand Canyon. Still watching them together as a real family for the first time. A genuine smile spread across my face. As they sat there, lost in their own world. I slipped away to buy a couple of bottles of water. I wasn't worried about her kidnapping Hope. I knew her character at least that much. Besides, Hope wouldn't abandon the dad who'd raised her for 2 years for a mother she'd just met, just as I predicted. When I returned, they were sitting on a bench, holding hands and chatting like old friends. The girl I loved and the child she'd given me who looked just like her. For a fleeting moment, I wished we could stay like this forever. But reality always has a way of crashing the party. When she saw me, Genevieve stood up, her hand tightening around Hope's. She opened her mouth, her expression hesitant. "Leo, I want to." "Don't even think about it." I cut her off. Just because I let them have a moment didn't mean she could just take my daughter. I knew that look. I knew exactly what she was going to ask. Just then, my parents, who ran a small produce stall at the local farmer's market, walked over. Even with the inheritance money, my folks couldn't sit still. They'd been working their whole lives. They saw Genevieve and froze. Their shock quickly turning to awkwardness. "Jen, honey, you're here," my mom said. After all, they'd been my accomplices in the Great Escape. A reunion with her daughter-in-law was bound to be a little tense. Genevieve just nodded politely. "Mom, Dad." I wasn't playing nice. She could see Hope fine, but she wasn't taking her. I swooped in and lifted Hope into my arms. I could feel her reluctance, her little eyes gazing longingly at Genevieve. I deliberately avoided her gaze, terrified that one look would make me cave. My parents saw my defensive posture and immediately understood. They stepped forward, flanking me like bodyguards, their eyes fixed warily on Genevieve. Seeing our united front, Genevieve knew she wasn't winning this battle today. She let out a soft sigh. "I have to get back to the office," she said, her excuse a little too quick. She turned and walked away. Watching her leave, I hesitated. Then, thinking of her as Hope's mother, I decided to give her a warning. "Hey." She stopped but didn't turn around. She was probably afraid that if she did, she'd come right back and fight for Hope. "Watch out for Cassie." The look she gave you when she left. It wasn't right. I saw her shoulders relax slightly. Then a small triumphant smile touched her lips, though I could only see it in my mind's eye. The idiot still cares about me. She was probably thinking. She gave a small wave over her shoulder without looking back, got in her car, and drove away. In my arms, Hope's eyes filled with tears as she watched the car disappear. "Daddy," she whispered. "Will I ever see Mommy again?" The three adults, my mom, my dad, and me, just looked at each other, a silent, helpless exchange. "You will, sweetie," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Then, without another word, we abandoned our little lemonade stand and rushed home. Back in the living room, Hope was still beaming, already planning what she'd wear the next time she saw her mom. The three of us, however, sat in grim silence. "We have to move," I said finally. My parents looked at me, then nodded in agreement. My dad pulled Hope into his lap. He'd been disappointed when he first found out I was having a daughter, but now he wouldn't trade her for 10 grandsons. They had seen what happened today. They knew that with the Reed's power and influence, taking Hope from us would be easy. Genevieve could just put the word out and half the city would line up to do her a favor. "They'll have to get through me first," my mom muttered, stroking Hope's hair. "No one is taking my granddaughter." I frowned, taking a deep drag from my cigarette. No time to waste. We pack tonight and leave. Forget the market stall. Forget the lemonade stand. Just grab the valuables. The inheritance my parents had received was mostly untouched. They'd been living off the money they earned from their stall. We had the means to disappear again. The house filled with the sounds of frantic packing. A short while later, we were sitting in the living room, surrounded by a few suitcases and the chaotic mess of our hasty departure. Hope, oblivious, was still hopping around, giddy with the thought of seeing her mother again. "Daddy, are we moving?" she asked as the sky outside began to darken. "We are," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "We're getting a bigger house so Mommy can come visit all the time." A wave of guilt washed over me as I saw her dance with joy. I considered telling her the truth, but decided against it. She'd never agree to leave if she knew. When it was late enough, I picked up a sleepy Hope with one arm and grabbed my suitcase with the other. My parents followed with theirs. I opened the front door and froze. Standing on the doorstep, bathed in the pale glow of the porch light, was Genevieve. Her expression was unreadable. A chilling calm. Well, this is a coincidence, she said, a ghost of a smile on her face. Going somewhere, honey, with all your luggage. My mind went blank. Is there anything more awkward than your wife catching you in the middle of running away from her? Fancy seeing you here? I managed, my laugh sounding hollow. My parents behind me saw her and stopped dead, their hands dropping their suitcases. We all just stared at each other. My mom was the first to break the silence. Jen, dear, we were just on our way back to you. We were just saying a child needs her mother. My dad chimed in, nodding vigorously. That's right. That's right. Hope's at that age. She needs her mommy. I stared at them dumbfounded. What happened to our plan? What happened to over my dead body? But then I looked back at Genevieve, saw the ice in her eyes under the moonlight, and gritted my teeth, nodding along with my mom's ridiculous story. I'm glad to hear you say that, Genevieve said smoothly. Because I came to bring you all home. She clapped her hands twice. A line of men in sharp black suits emerged from the shadows, professionally taking the luggage from our hands and loading it into a fleet of black cars parked down the street. My parents and I exchanged a look of utter defeat. She brought bodyguards. This wasn't a negotiation. It was an extraction. But something in me snapped. I hated this. I hated how she always made decisions for everyone. How she never consulted me. Just like when she kept Cassie close without a word of discussion, ignoring me when I tried to tell her what her cousin was really like. What are you going to do? Drag her back to your mansion? I snapped, my voice full of contempt. Leave her with a nanny while you jet set around the world, just like when she was born. A flicker of guilt crossed her face before being replaced by a look of amusement. When did I ever say I was taking her? That threw me. My anger deflated like a pop balloon. You're not. She looked at me like I was the biggest idiot on the planet. I'm her mother, Leo. Don't I have the right to even see my own child? I just want to be able to see her when I want to. If I was going to forcibly take her, do you think I would have come here myself? Oh, the word came out soft and stupid. You mean I didn't have to orchestrate this whole midnight escape? Of course you have that right, I stammered, feeling my face heat up. As long as she wasn't taking my daughter away, anything else was fine. My parents, watching their son get played like a fiddle, shook their heads in despair. They walked past me without a word, got into the back of the Rolls-Royce waiting behind Genevieve and shot me a dirty look as they closed the door. I had no idea what that was for. Genevieve looked at my dumbfounded expression and sighed, a small, weary shake of her head. She gently took the sleeping Hope from my arms and turned toward the car. I stood there on the curb for a long moment, my mind reeling. All this time, she just wanted to see her daughter. She hadn't mentioned me at all. For some reason, that left a strange empty feeling in my chest. The car window rolled down. Genevieve leaned her head out. What are you waiting for? Get in and drive. I snapped back to reality, my eyes locking on her complex expression. Right. Coming. On the drive back to Northwood City, Hope woke up in Genevieve's arms, happily chirping, Mommy, Mommy, over and over. She seemed perfectly content, not even asking where our old man was. My heart sank a little. Seriously, is the blood tie thing really this strong? Less than a day with her mother and I'm already forgotten history. I caught their reflection in the rearview mirror watching them play. Wow. Hope, I said, my voice dripping with jealousy. Got a new mom and already forgot about your poor old dad. Her reply was a dagger to the heart. Daddy, what are you doing here? What am I doing here? Should I be in the trunk? Seeing my crestfallen face, she leaned forward and planted a loud wet kiss on my cheek. My mood instantly lifted, but that was the extent of her attention. She immediately went back to giggling with her mom in the back seat. The sounds of their laughter grew louder, and I started to regret this whole arrangement. At this rate, I wouldn't have to worry about Genevieve kidnapping her. Hope would pack her own bags and move in with her mom voluntarily. The car finally pulled up to a large modern villa. It was the house I bought with a chunk of the inheritance money after Hope was born. We'd only lived in it for a few months before I took her and ran. After we got out, Hope was still attached to Genevieve's hip, a constant stream of mommy flowing from her lips. I just rolled my eyes and followed them inside, making silly faces behind their backs. They were too lost in their reunion to notice. As for my parents, they'd been dropped off earlier, claiming they wanted to visit some old friends. I collapsed onto the plush sofa. I'd only been driving for a few hours, but it felt exhausting. I wasn't used to this kind of work anymore. These days, my most strenuous activity was pressing the on button on a blender. The truth is, we hadn't run that far. I figured the safest place to hide was right under her nose in a small county just outside Northwood City's limits. If we'd gone to a major city, she probably would have found us in weeks. Once Hope had tired herself out and fallen asleep in her mother's arms. Genevieve carefully carried her into the master bedroom. When she came out, she found me sprawled on the couch and frowned. I heard her footsteps approaching and cracked open an eye. She was standing right over me. I couldn't even be bothered to sit up. "What's up?" I mumbled. She sat down on the armchair across from me. "What are your plans now?" I didn't even look at her. 2 words floated out of my mouth. "Live Rich." The corner of her mouth twitched. She clearly didn't know how to respond to that. After a long silence, I opened my eyes again and saw the conflicted look on her face. I closed them again, spit it out, "If you have something to say." Genevieve took a deep breath, her gaze shifting to a spot on the wall. "I need a new executive assistant. I was thinking you could come work for me." "A job," I said without a moment's hesitation. "Maybe in my next life." Seriously, why would I work when I had a perfectly good inheritance to live off of? Especially a job like that, basically being a high-end servant. As much as I wanted to be with her again, I was sure there were easier ways than becoming her employee. "What kind of example is that for your daughter?" she challenged, her voice sharp. That question made me sit up. I looked her dead in the eye and said slowly and clearly, "She can live rich with me." Sure enough, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Genevieve's expression, which had been relatively normal, turned to ice. A dangerous glint appeared in her eyes. I immediately threw my hands up. "Kidding. Just kidding. How could I? With a role model like you in the house, she's already set. I'm just here to be the fun parent. Lower the academic pressure. You know." The chill in the air subsided. I let out the breath I was holding. "I'm not dealing with you," she said, turning to leave. "Fine, don't take the job." As she headed for the door, she added, "I have to get back to the office." I could have sworn I heard a hint of disappointment in her voice, but she kept her word. She left without hope. I knew she owned several properties and rotated between them. As I heard her car's engine roar to life outside, I shot up from the sofa and tiptoed toward her bedroom. I stood outside the door for a solid minute, giving myself a pep talk. I was going to check on Hope, not to snoop. That's it. I opened the door, but my eyes immediately started darting around the room. The decor was the same as when I'd left. Nothing seemed out of place. After a thorough scan, I confirmed there were no signs of another man. Only then did I let myself relax and look at my daughter sleeping peacefully on the bed. I leaned down, planted a soft kiss on her cheek, and crept back out. Just as I closed the door, Cassie Reed burst into the house, shouting, "Jen! Jen, are you here?" Thinking of my sleeping daughter, my patience snapped. I grabbed her by the arm and dragged her back outside. "What do you think you're doing? Get your hands off me, you country bumpkin." "Genevieve went to work," I said, my voice cold, ignoring her insult. "Oh, look who it is," she sneered. "The runaway husband couldn't stay away, could you? Had to come crawling back to sponge off my cousin." I gave her a nasty smile. "That's right. I'm back to live the good life, better than some people I know who'd sell their own soul for a promotion." Cassie took a step back, her face a mask of shock. "Oh, how did you know?" I leaned in close, my voice a conspiratorial whisper. "That little incident in Miami with that crypto billionaire. Do I need to be more specific? Cassandra. Such a pretty name for such a nasty two-faced snake." I knew far more than she thought I did. She pointed a trembling finger at me, sputtering, "You're lying," before turning and practically fleeing the property. Watching her retreat, I smirked. "You can't play me, kid. You're not in my league." "Is that so? You seem to know quite a lot." I whipped around. Genevieve was standing right behind me. I jumped like I'd seen a ghost, clutching my chest. "You? Why are you back again?" My reaction seemed to erase any curiosity from her face, replacing it with a familiar frost. "What? I can't come back to my own house now." No, that's not it," I said quickly. "It's just you just left for work. It's strange to see you back so soon." She gave me an exasperated look, said nothing, and walked past me toward her car. That's when I saw the file folder in her hand. I slapped my forehead. Of course, she came back to get something she forgot. My stupid brain. As she drove past me, she rolled down the window. Her expression was completely serious. "You should read more while you're at home," she said. "There's a great author, Julian Croft. Look him up." And with that, she floored it and was gone. A writer named Julian Croft. Give me a break. I might not be a genius, but I have a literature degree. Who did she think she was? Despite myself, I pulled out my phone and Googled the name. His author page popped up. His most famous work, The Simpleton. I got it. It was the adult equivalent of a kid telling you to look at a page in a book where they've written, "You're a moron." I had a laugh. The nerve. I walked back into the empty villa. The sprawling living room suddenly felt wrong, unwelcoming. I sank onto the sofa, an uneasy feeling settling in my stomach, and began to wonder if coming back here had been a good idea after all. A month flew by in a blur. Genevieve kept her word. She came to see Hope, never once trying to take her away. She even ended up staying at the villa about 20 nights out of the month, though we slept in separate rooms. Watching her and Hope laugh and play together every day filled me with a strange sense of loss, like I was an outsider in my own life. My parents had stayed for a few days before deciding they couldn't get used to city life and hurried back to their quiet country home. One afternoon, I left Hope with the nanny and went for a walk. The streets were bustling with people, but I felt completely adrift with no idea where I was going. Without thinking, I found myself standing in front of a familiar barbecue joint, a place where my best friend Mark and I had spent countless nights drinking beer and eating skewers. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. "Yo, barbecue at the old spot." "Leo, dude, is that you? You finally decided to call me. Let's talk more food. You in or out?" "For you, man. I'm there and I'm drinking you under the table tonight." I hung up, went inside, and ordered a mountain of food and a case of beer. By the time Mark showed up, the grilled skewers were just arriving at our table, sizzling and perfect. Hours later, the ground around our table was littered with empty beer bottles. We were both red-faced and slurring. "It's hell, man," I confessed, the alcohol loosening my tongue. "I'm living in the same house with my wife again, but I feel like a ghost. Every time I'm in that house, all I can think about is those first few months after Hope was born. When Genevieve wouldn't even look at her. All the frustration and hurt I'd bottled up for 2 years came pouring out. It felt good to finally say it. "You have no idea how lucky you are," Mark mumbled, his own words thick with drink. "When you took off with Hope, Jen went crazy. Like completely lost it. I've never seen anyone so broken." "What are you talking about?" I poured more beer into my glass. "She only married me because of my inheritance money." "Are you kidding me?" Mark's eyes widened, a flash of sobriety cutting through the haze. "That tech billionaire's kid offered her a 9-figure settlement to marry him, and she turned him down flat. She chose your dinky little inheritance over that." "Really?" I murmured, the words slurring as my head hit the table. And then everything went black. What I didn't know was that the moment I passed out, the drunken haze in Mark's eyes vanished completely. He shook my shoulder, and when I didn't move, he pulled out his phone. "He's out," he said into it. A moment later, Genevieve walked into the restaurant. She nodded a quick thank you to Mark, then effortlessly slung my arm over her shoulder and began steering my unconscious body toward her car. Mark watched us go, picked up one of the remaining beers, and took a long swig. He sighed, wondering when he'd ever get a love life of his own instead of being a pawn in someone else's elaborate romantic scheme. It turned out Genevieve had known I was spiraling. She had someone follow me that day. As soon as I called Mark, he had called her and they had hatched a plan to get me to talk. When I woke up, Genevieve was sitting on the edge of the bed. I thought I was still dreaming because the Ice Queen was actually smiling at me. On instinct, I reached out and pinched her cheek. The feel of her soft skin was real and my groggy eyes shot wide open. I quickly checked myself. My clothes were still on. I breathed a sigh of relief. "What?" she said, a teasing smile playing on her lips as she watched my panicked self-assessment. "Afraid I'd take advantage of you." "No," I shot back with a smirk. "Just afraid I'd sleep through it and miss all the fun." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "Pervert," she muttered under her breath, but her smile widened. She then produced a bowl of chicken soup from behind her back and held it out to me. I saw the chunks of chicken resting at the bottom and felt my own lips curve into a smile. "You made this for me?" "No, the nanny did," she said, her eyes darting away. Her stubbornness was adorable. I decided to have some fun. I gave her a playful, knowing look. "Really? I don't believe you." She turned bright red, biting her lip. "Fine, don't drink it." "I'll just take it away," she huffed, making a move to stand. I snatched the bowl from her hands. "I'll drink it." "Of course, I'll drink it." I took a sip. It was delicious, rich, and flavorful, but I put on a pained expression and pointed at the bowl. "Ugh, it's so salty and bitter." She immediately grabbed the bowl back. "That's impossible." "I barely put any salt in," she said and took a sip herself to check. I just watched her, a feeling of pure happiness washing over me. But even in that moment, the memory of those first few months was still a thorn in my heart. Realizing she'd been tricked, Genevieve blushed an even deeper shade of crimson. She shot me an annoyed but fond glare, then turned to leave the room. Just as she reached the doorway, she paused and looked back at me, her expression suddenly serene. "Tomorrow," she said calmly. "Tomorrow, you'll understand everything." Her words left me completely baffled. Understand what? She wouldn't say another word. And no matter how much I racked my brain, I couldn't figure it out. I just have to wait. The next day, the news was everywhere. Genevieve Reed had done the unthinkable. She had personally turned her own uncle and his entire family over to the authorities. The scandal had started with her cousin, Cassie, being investigated for embezzling company funds, which then led to the discovery of her father's much larger crimes. Years of tax evasion and fraudulent accounting. The name Genevieve Reed became legend in Northwood City. In the back rooms and boardrooms of the city's elite, she was now marked as a person never ever to be crossed. If she could do that to her own family, what wouldn't she do to an enemy? I was sitting on the sofa staring at my phone, watching a clip of Genevieve at a press conference, calmly and methodically laying out every one of her uncle and cousin's crimes. Seeing her up there on that stage, powerful and in command, I was completely mesmerized. Suddenly, a pair of soft arms wrapped around my neck and her unique scent filled the air. "Honey," she whispered in my ear, her voice thick with emotion. "Do you have any idea how much I wanted to hold Hope when she was born?" Her voice cracked, but I didn't dare. My uncle, his family, they were watching my every move. The moment I showed any weakness, they would have used Hope to control me. I already knew they were the ones who ruined my father. I had to get my revenge. I had to be cold. I had to build my defenses one piece at a time. But just when I was finally strong enough to fight them, you, my faithless husband, took our daughter and disappeared. Thank God you didn't go too far. If you had, I don't think I ever would have found you. I felt my shoulder grow damp with her tears. And just like that, it all made sense. Her coldness, her distance, her obsession with work, it was all an act, a shield. The last thorn that had been lodged in my heart for 2 years was finally gone. Gently, I turned and pulled the sobbing woman from behind me into my arms, holding her close and kissing the tears from her eyes. After she cried herself out, a memory from my drunken conversation with Mark surfaced. I couldn't resist teasing her. "So," I said, a playful grin spreading across my face. "Mark told me you turned down a 9-figure offer from some billionaire's kid for me and my dinky little inheritance. Does this mean my beautiful wife has had a crush on me for a long time?" Her face turned a brilliant shade of red, and she buried her head in my chest, refusing to meet my eyes. "Who likes you? You're so full of yourself." "Oh, really?" I chuckled. "Such a stubborn mouth. I guess I'll just have to see for myself." And then I silenced her protests with a kiss. It was the meeting of a long parched desert and a torrential rain. The storm that followed was inevitable,